I'm just checking with my colleagues whether we're okay to start. Okay, thank you so much. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Moulds. I'm an executive member of the International Parliamentary Engagement Network, which co-hosts this session with the IPU Public Engagement Hub. I'd like to pass now to our colleagues from New Zealand to give us a special katakia welcome to this session that we're working together on today. Thank you, Caroline.
Kia ora, Sarah. Karanga ki a ranganui I tūnei. Karanga ki a papu I taku tūnei. Hua kina atura te tatou o tēnei whare kōrero. O hia te kōrero, o hia te whakaro, o hia ki te o marama. E rongo whakahirihia ki ronga huie tai kie. Thank you, Sarah. So the reason why we do a karakia at the beginning of our meetings is just to show that we honour the treaty partnership with the tangata whenua of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this seminar on new initiatives from the New Zealand Parliament's engagement team. We're very lucky today to have 3 different speakers who I'm going to introduce to you in a moment. I just wanted to let everybody know that this is part of our series of seminars that explore public engagement with Parliament, following the publication of the Global Parliamentary Report on Public Engagement last March. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today from different parts of the world. I just wanted to go through a couple of our housekeeping rules. So one of the first important things to know is that this seminar has translations available for you through the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen. Please keep your mic muted while presenters are speaking, but we love to see your face. So if you can keep your video on, that would be lovely. Once we've heard from our speakers, there'll be the opportunity for you to ask questions, and we'd love you to do that by raising your hand or putting a comment in the chat box. So I'd like to move now to introduce the special speakers we've got today. They're all from the New Zealand Parliament, and it's evening in New Zealand, so good evening, colleagues. We have with us today Caroline Wallace, who is the Education Lead in the Parliamentary Engagement Team in the New Zealand Parliament. Caroline's working life has covered working in both parliamentary committees, in the Secretariat teams, as well as 23 years as a teacher. She's been with the New Zealand Parliament's education team since the start of 2020. And joining Caroline is colleague Troy Murphy, who's the Senior Education Advisor in the Parliamentary Engagement Team. Prior to working at Parliament, Troy worked in the museum sector for over 10 years, with much of this time specialising in education. We also have Maya Carmody, who is a Senior Education Advisor in the Parliamentary Engagement Team with a background in teaching and public programming within the museum sector. So we're in for a real treat for their presentation today, and I welcome Caroline to take over the controls of the Zoom meeting for the next 20 or 25 minutes. Thank you.
Kia ora, Sarah. Thank you. Ko Kairahi Maturanga, ko Caroline Toko Ono Enwa. I'm the Education Lead at New Zealand Parliament. My name is Caroline, and so we're really, really proud to be sharing our mahi with you, which is our work. So I'm going to screen share our PowerPoint. I promise you it won't be death by PowerPoint. We have tried to include as many images as possible to try and capture our work. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that clearly. All right, so we are going to share with you today new initiatives. I guess these initiatives that we are going to talk about have been as a result of the pandemic, but some of them have been ones that we've developed just because we felt that they were really important things to do. So we're going to cover today who we are, just really, really briefly. examples of initiatives from the past 3 years, but also examples of how we've reached out to different groups. So different groups in terms of school groups, public servants, tertiary level groups, and also our outreach into communities. We are going to do this quite briefly. So if we cover something quickly, hopefully it'll spark an interest and you'll ask us a question later on. We're also really mindful that New Zealanders can talk quite quickly. So we're going to try and slow down, because sometimes we may speed up and we might lose some of our words and therefore the understanding. So who we are is that we are actually a team of 6 educators. In the New Zealand Parliament, there's 120 members of Parliament, so we're not a huge Parliament, and we are unicameral. And our goal, and we've worked really hard to kind of crystallise it, is it's twofold. We really want people to develop their understanding of practices, because we believe if they develop the understanding, then that it allows and moves on to meaningful engagement. The challenges that we have found, and this has been ongoing, is how do we make our work relevant? And by relevant, I mean, what stories are we telling? What narratives are we telling that makes the work of Parliament mean something to people that we're trying to help develop their understanding? The other challenge we've found is of accessibility. And by accessibility, I mean, how do we reach people? What groups don't connect with Parliament or don't have an understanding of Parliament, and how can we best access them with information? A key part to us thinking about how best we can develop initiatives is that our Parliament actually has an engagement strategy. This is the second iteration of it. So we had an engagement strategy from 2019 to 2021. It has really key, it has 5 key components to it. And those components are ones which drive the work of everyone in Parliament. So not just the people that work in the engagement area, but everybody is made aware of Parliament engagement strategy and how can their mahi and work help connect people to Parliament. There's 2 really important parts of this strategy that resonate with the education team and have actually driven quite a lot of our work. And one is that a key idea from this strategy is that Parliament is for everyone and that Parliament encourages participation. So we work in that area to make sure that we are, I guess, showcasing ideas that show that Parliament isn't just for like people in suits, that actually there's lots of ways that people can connect with their representatives, but also we're very much keen for people to realise that they can take actions, and that's not just reserved for, you know, certain kinds of people as well, like activists. So the first initiative I want to talk about actually comes from one of the challenges that we faced, and that is how do we make Parliament accessible? And what we did is that we moved online, and some of that was obviously in response to COVID. We had different kind of measures of COVID restrictions over the first 3 years of the pandemic. So I just want to acknowledge here as well that our movement online, we want to acknowledge that it was problematic sometimes because still in societies there are digital divides. So by completely going online, we needed to acknowledge that for some groups and schools that we work with, that it just simply wouldn't be possible due to lack of computers or you know, their own internet connectivity. So we still need to make sure that we had physical resources as well. But our movement online did allow us to continue our reach out to schools, even though schools may not have been able to come and visit us. The first one I just want to mention is our partnership with Education Perfect, which is an online learning platform. We write the content, they host our content and they push it out into schools. And they get a huge reach around schools that 6 educators couldn't. So we work with them so that those schools have free access to our content. And we've written 6 modules with them. We get really good reach out into schools, like I say, because they have a marketing division. And, you know, over 100,000 questions answered last year via those modules, which has been great. We also have online visits, and those really kicked off in a lockdown we had in 2021 with the Delta variant. And you can see there an example of Troy hosting a visit. Our online visits are basically a Zoom meeting like this with video footage moving through all the spaces that we would normally move through. So we take them through the same visit that we would do if they came on an on-site visit. We open it up for questions. We try and run it as much as possible as a classroom, as we would if we had the class with us and we were showing them around. This one here, we had a very special guest. We had our speaker. He came along as well, talked to the students, answered questions. Yeah, and our online visits were just a really good way to keep our reach out into communities. We also had a lot of schools join in that first lot that actually have never visited us. So the online visits have allowed us to connect to schools who just don't have the money or capability to get to Wellington to visit Parliament. So we have some bespoke education resources as well, and this was in response to the challenge of relevance. We wrote things that were quite specific to certain levels of the curriculum and also certain issues. So one of the ones we wrote was called Democracy's Response in a Crisis. It was a particular resource written about the March 2020 lockdowns, the restriction on democratic freedoms, and what Parliament's response was to those restrictions. So for example, in New Zealand, we had a select committee that was established solely to make sure that there was an avenue for scrutiny of government actions at a time when other democratic freedoms were being restricted. And so we wrote a resource that tapped into, I guess, what we would consider democratic freedoms and also then what Parliament's role was. And there's an example of what we put into that workbook. It was also available online. And then we also wrote a bespoke resource for our senior high school students who have an assessment, a link to the national curriculum about how to take social actions. And so that workbook and then a corresponding program where they can come into Parliament is completely aligned to work that they can then complete in the classroom and get units towards a qualification. So those are some examples of how we kind of tailored and tried to make things more relevant. The other way that we have tried to, I guess, look for groups that we can reach out to comes in our youth reference group. And this is where you're going to get a break from my voice. And I'm going to pass over to the lovely Maya.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for coming along today. I know some of you it's the middle of the night, so thank you for being here. My name's Maya. I'm going to talk briefly about Rito te Paremata, which is the youth reference group for Office of the Clerk and Parliamentary Service. This group came from the Parliamentary Engagement Strategy, and it focused on engaging with disengaged groups, especially young people. We do have a youth parliament, which happens every 3 years, but we wanted a project that was more consistent and continual to build lasting relationships with young people. We did have a research stage where we spoke with government agencies, community groups, the City Council, all that run youth initiatives. And we decided that a year-long pilot of the youth reference group was the best way of achieving this goal. So their first year was in 2021, and we had 8 members from the Wellington region. And then in the second year, 2022, we expanded to all of Aotearoa, New Zealand. The biggest challenge that we had with expanding across the country was communication. It was very difficult to have impromptu meetings with everyone spread out across New Zealand. So they did set up an Instagram chat to keep conversations flowing and check in regularly. And we had to structure the timetable for that year so that we could keep track of when everyone's flights were taking place. There are two standout aspects of this program that I want to touch on. The first is that applicants didn't need any prior Parliament knowledge and could therefore apply in any way that they liked. We had some people apply with poems and songs. Some people submitted videos, crosswords. Someone even submitted coding, which was very cool. And the second is that a key value of this program is that co-design is at the core. So while most of the logistics and administrative work is done by the coordinators, myself and another woman called Tamara, decisions are made by the young people, including what they would like their annual project to be. Slide. Speaking of the annual project, so each year the members are tasked with a goal of creating a project with the aim of increasing youth engagement with Parliament. So they use Kantar research to guide their annual project. Kantar is a data analytics company that has conducted research for us into audience engagement with Parliament. The first year, they created a project called Rarapa, Shining a Light on Democracy. And the two words that they pulled out of the Kantar research were accessible and relatable. To reach these goals of creating something accessible and relatable, they created a 4-part video series that focused on submissions, petitions, protest, and visiting an electorate and community office. And they used examples of how young people had engaged with Parliament in the past and interviewed them to explain this process. For the second year, they created the Rito o te Paremata Instagram, and they made some reels. The words that they wanted to focus on that year from the Kantar research were concise, trustworthy, and trendy. So they really honed in on that trendy aspect, and they wanted to create more organic content that looked like it had been made by young people for young people. And for that, they focused on removing misconceptions and barriers that they felt prevented young people from engaging. And they tried to make fun videos that were encouraging for future learning. Now, as well as the main project, there have been other professional development and reference opportunities offered throughout the year. So next slide. So as you can see here, there's an array of different things that they've taken part in at Parliament. And there have been some really great outcomes for the members of this program as well. One of the members now works at Parliament, and some of the members have gained graduate positions in government agencies using us as a reference, which has been a great outcome. The second initiative I'm going to quickly touch on is the coordination of free professional learning for public servants. So these are courses that are a chance to learn from and network with experts from across the parliamentary sector. And we organise presenters from Select Committee Services, the House Office, and Policy to Legislation at the bottom there is presented in collaboration with the Parliamentary Council Office. We collect attendee and presenter feedback at the end of every seminar, which has led to a few changes with how the programs are run, such as more time for questions and interactive activities for participants as well. The main challenge we've had is high registration but low attendance, but this was due to the pandemic. Now I'm going to pass over to Troy, who's going to talk about professional development opportunities that we offer for members of Parliament.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Hello, everyone. Ko Troy Murphy tuku ingoa. Ko katoa tohu matua mataranga ahau. So I'm a senior education advisor to the education team. And as Maya was saying, we are responsible for professional development of our members of parliament. This year, 2023, is an election year, and we're responsible for the coordination of, the initial induction sessions for members of parliament. So our members, they come to us with varying degrees of understanding about Parliament and its rules, known as the standing orders. So we're very instrumental in coordinating with various proceduralists, such as our clerks, our House Office staff, and various divisions within the Parliamentary Service to offer different induction sessions. We also help these proceduralists and these staff members in the preparation of their PowerPoint presentations and their talks, just so they're pitching their content at the right level. Now, the initial induction program is quite an intense sort of pressure cooker time for new members of parliament, and it is very much an impossible task to absolutely absorb every single piece of information that they'll get in the initial induction period. So with our professional development sessions, we actually run them over the course of the whole 3-year parliament, and we run sort of induction sessions every couple of months for the new cohort. So in the 2020 election, it was quite a large intake of MPs, so 42 MPs. As Caroline mentioned before, we're a parliament of 120, so you're looking at over a third of the parliament being new members. In regards to the topics that are covered in that ongoing induction, it varies from kind of refresher sessions, so revisiting content that they might have had in their initial induction, to more advanced sessions on parliamentary procedures, which we often find are a lot more effective when MPs have had a bit more experience and a bit of time in their roles. When it comes to the challenges with this, professional development sessions that we run, a really big challenge that we have is getting MPs to attend. MPs are very busy people, so to try and mitigate these issues that we have, we have a good spread of food on usually. We usually host them in the evenings when there's a lot less sort of commitments on MP's time in various circumstances, and we try to organise punchy marketing, make it really appealing in that sense, but also come up with topics that that they've come up with themselves in instances where we're able to. These pictures here are of the initial induction of our 53rd parliamentarians, so the new ones that is. So you can see them, partaking in sessions, the debating chamber there. That image down the bottom left is actually them partaking in their welcome ceremony, which is known as a mihi whakatau. But it's not just the new members of parliament that get professional development. We also have professional development for MPs that are chairpersons in select committees, and Maya is holding the pen on that, so I'm just going to throw it back to her to talk about that professional development.
Thanks, Troy. So we work alongside the clerk assistant to offer training sessions for chairs and deputy chairs, clerks, and deputy clerks of select committees. These have ranged from covering the basics of what is your role to the separation of powers and the judiciary with guest speaker, the Chief Justice, Helen Winkleman. Attendance has been pretty good for these sessions. They're offered hybrid, so MPs can join via Zoom from the office. And they're also offered in the dinner breaks with catering, which, like Troy touched on, is a draw card for MPs. I'm going to pass back to Troy now to talk about the Speakers Outreach Program.
Brilliant. So this is something that I'm quite passionate about, actually, and I think there's some outreach coordinators in the chat that I saw as well that are watching online. So this, you'll be quite interested in this content here. But we have a Speakers Outreach Program that basically focuses on bringing Parliament to regions that might find it difficult to travel to our capital city, Wellington, where our parliamentary buildings are. So this program, it basically involves a delegation of MPs led by the speaker, and we visit various schools, community groups, and tertiary education providers. It is quite important for me to emphasize that these outreach, visits, they're apolitical, and the emphasis is on parliamentary work rather than policy. All political parties get invited to attend and put up nominated representatives from their party to attend the outreach. So this slide that you can see here has got various pictures of our most recent outreach to the west coast of New Zealand's South Island. When we visit the primary schools and the high schools, we generally run a mock debating program. So we've got like a makeshift, debating chamber. So you can sort of see a backdrop in that top left picture there, which the speaker sits in front of. And the students, they will debate a mock bill that they've come up with. So the topics vary. We've had students debate the abolishment of their school uniforms. One of the schools we visited down in Westport was discussing if we should tax white baiting more vigorously, because there's a sort of an issue there with overfishing of that species. It could potentially become endangered or extinct if fishing rates continue at the rate they're going. So yeah, it's basically anything that the students wish to debate. The speaker will play the role of the speaker, and they'll chair the debate. And then once the students have all said their piece, usually the MPs that are on the trip as well will partake in the debate, which is quite entertaining. And then the speaker will call for a vote, very much like he does so in the House. And the students will either, vote the fake bill through, or they'll vote it down. So that's for like high schools and primary schools that we visit on this program. For tertiary education providers, we generally will organise a sausage sizzle or a barbecue. So you can, if you look at that bottom left picture there, you can actually see the current Speaker of the House, the Right Honourable Adrian Rurafe, preparing some sausages there. So they'll cook food for the students and the faculty, the staff, and then after they've cooked the food, they'll usually have a bit of a, time to have some casual conversations over some kai over some food. And just get in touch, with the local communities that way. So next month, I'll actually be going on another outreach with the speaker up to a kura kaupapa, just up the coast of the North Island. And a kura kaupapa is a total immersion school. So no English is spoken at these schools. All the teaching and learning is done completely in te reo Māori. So that would be, an awesome experience to be a part of. When it comes to like challenges with organising, the outreach program, it doesn't happen all the time, but on very rare occasions, it can be quite hard to find like communities to participate in the program. Sometimes there, can be some reticence, and we really have to kind of hunt to find groups to partake in the program. Doesn't happen all the time, but on a rare occasion, we can be on the hunt quite vigorously to find groups to partake. But I'm just reading some of the chat there. yeah, no, definitely. Having a conversation over some food, it's always good. And I quite often will have chats to the people as well, in that supporting function as well, that supporting role. So yeah, that's all the content for this slide. Should I hand back to you, Caroline, or am I closing it off the formal part of the karakia, or?
We might karakia at the very end, Troy, I think, just once we've finished the with the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can go back to seeing everyone's faces. And yeah, we're happy to hand it back to you, Sarah, and take questions.
Thank you so much, Caroline, Troy and Maya. That was a fascinating tour of the great work that's happening there in New Zealand. So inspiring. Now it's the opportunity for our participants to ask some questions. So you can see, hopefully down the bottom of your screen, you can raise your virtual hand if you have a question for our wonderful speakers, or you can put your question in the chat box. So I've got a question from Molly Jean here in the chat, who says, do you provide training for MPs on going into schools and working with young people?
Yep, I can take that one. We provide resources for them to use, and we provide those resources to their electorate and community officers. We communicate, I guess, with the people that are their organisers, if you know what I mean. So when we first run those induction sessions for members of Parliament after an election, we let them know the work of the parliamentary engagement team, which includes education, and so this is covered. But we find that if our most regular contact is with their executive assistants and their people that work on the ground, then they can give their MPs the resources. The resources that we have for them are things that they can take into a school which they can use readily, like a cheat sheet of, I'm talking to a group of 10-year-olds, what are the things that I can say which mean that I'm not being overtly political, but I'm talking about parliamentary structure, which might sound like that we're telling the MPs something they might already know, but what we're sharing with them is how do they share their knowledge with a 10-year-old, which they may not know. So we're providing the information that they know, but in a way that's accessible for young people. So we have cheat sheets for different year levels, and if they are, we did have a couple of MPs that would prefer to take something visual like a PowerPoint, so we created some of those for three different year levels, so that if they wanted the security of something visual to talk to, that they had that as well.
Thank you, Caroline. We've got a couple of other great questions in the chat here from Sally Coyne and from Geordie from the Western Australian Parliament that are directed at this question of resources. So what kind of budget and resources do you have to do these programs? And also, have you included a focus now on inward kind of hosted programs now that restrictions have eased? I don't know if you want to answer some of those in a group, and we're getting some other great questions coming through in the chat, so we'll just maybe handle that one first.
Maybe Troy, do you want to handle the budget for outreach?
Yeah, so we've got, so the Parliament Education team, we sit within a wider engagement team. And underneath that engagement umbrella, we've got education, communications, inter-parliamentary relations, and our communications team. So that department does have budget to support us, going in, flights, sausages, that sort of things to support that. There was a question in there about in-house training as well, when it comes to the budget as well. So when it comes to the professional development of members of Parliament, generally the sessions that I was talking about, they're generally run by staff that work for either Office of the Clerk or Parliamentary Service, so those proceduralists. So thankfully, because their wages get paid, we get paid by the same organisation. They usually give up their time in the evening, if they're not on an evening shift, to talk to the members of Parliament, and they'll get toil, flexi time. They'll be able to take that time at another time there. I know we have run some select committee chairpersons trainings with some external providers, Caroline, and they do have a budget, which I'm a bit envious of, where they can bring external presenters in sometimes. So one that I can think of that we ran in the past was around tikanga, so correct protocol, when going on to marae or engaging, with kura or iwi from different areas, the correct, protocol, kawa and things like that.
I can jump in there, and when program restrictions lifted, since the restrictions lifted, our visits lifted, and we do have an opportunity for people to apply for a subsidy if it takes a while, if it's difficult for them to travel to Parliament. They have to book with us, they have to show confirmation of a booking, and then it's actually done separate to us, which we're not a fan of. We prefer to have something that we could share with schools as a subsidy, but we don't have that financial ability to do that at the moment. It's definitely in a 3-year plan, I tell you. But there is a organisation which will grant travel subsidies to schools if they come, if it's really cost prohibitive for them to come.
Caroline, I think thank you so much for that lovely answer. We've got some great questions in the chat. I'll just throw to Christina first with her hand up, and then we can go to the chat again. There's so many brilliant questions. It's wonderful. Okay, Christina.
So much, Sarah, and thank you so much, Caroline, Troy and Maya. Really, really interesting. I've got so many questions, and it's so nice that I'm not sharing this, so I can actually ask questions for once, because usually I'm sharing it. But I won't ask all the questions that I have. I'll probably come back to you. One thing I loved was the reference to food as being, I'm dual national, I'm Portuguese, and food is just key for everything. We do everything about food. There's nothing like having food for the chat to start going and people feeling more relaxed. But I wanted to ask you about your youth reference group. And you say you always also have a youth parliament. And I'd like to know, don't give me too much detail about the youth parliament, but what distinguishes the two of them? So what's specific to the youth reference group, and in particular how you select them? So it sounded like they apply for it. So if they apply for it, how do they find out about it, and who selects them? Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Such a great question with so many moving parts. I'm probably going to have to ask you to repeat some parts of the question. But for the first part about the difference between Youth Parliament and Rito Te Paremata, Youth Parliament happens once every 3 years. And there's 120 young people that are selected by a member of parliament. So the members of parliament choose a young person to come and take part as a youth MP. For Rito Te Paremata, the coordinators and a support person from HR choose the members for the group. So a slightly different recruitment process. Also for Rito Te Paremata, they don't need to have any parliament knowledge. Normally for youth parliament, it's getting a little bit better, but normally the young people that apply and get those roles are already incredibly engaged in some way or another. So we really wanted this initiative to be for young people who may not have had an opportunity, but who have really great, strong connections in their community. So some of the members are connected through church or through kapahaka, which is Māori performing arts, or they volunteer. So that's why we made it hopefully as accessible as possible, that they can apply in any way they like. So they don't need to talk about the things that they've achieved. They can submit a song or write a poem. Now, the second part of your question, I am going to have to get you to repeat it.
You have sort of replied already, answered already, but in terms of how they find out about it, so you've got these amazing young people who apply for it, but how do they find out about it? Thank you.
Great question. So for advertising the role, here in New Zealand, the Ministry of Education has a list of all the contact details for every school. So we send out the information to all high schools and kura kaupapa about Rito Te Paremata. The age range is 16 to 20. So we also contact universities, and we send them a poster that they can print and put up for people to see. We also put it on our website and on all of our social media. We ask the Rito members from the previous year to share it within their communities. It's a real smorgasbord of contacting people, but the feedback that we've got from the members currently in the team say that they heard it through Instagram or through their teacher or through a friend at school. So they're normally the ways that people find out.
Many thanks, Maya.
Thank you.
We've got lots of different questions coming in. I'll try and go through them in order and see where we can get some commonality. And Sally, I can tell that it would be great to throw to you soon too. So just to go back a little to some of the earlier questions in the chat, there was this interesting point about, do you face any resistance from schools participating because they might see the engagement as being political? And maybe I'll put another question in there. How do you evaluate your success of your programs? I think that was one from Derek.
I'm not sure. The resistance just might be in the form of non-engagement, as opposed to people being openly saying we're really choosing not to engage with you. We've got repeat schools that always come, and we've got repeat schools where we know the teachers are coming with a certain point of view, but we walk pretty steadily down the middle of the line, and we've made pretty clear in our resourcing and in our communications that we're apolitical. And yeah, I don't know, it's very rare. There's the odd occasion, which I'm sure Maya and Troy and we all know, where people and teachers are trying to bait us, but we're not biting. But in terms of them saying really we don't want to, not really. They just, I guess, people vote for their feet and don't come. And we haven't had a problem having a massive decline or anything like that. It's there's been a refresh of our curriculum, and the refresh of the curriculum has made it compulsory for all New Zealand children to learn Aotearoa New Zealand histories up to our year 10, which is up to 14, 15. So that compulsory nature of learning Aotearoa New Zealand histories, and by that I mean everyone's histories and all stories, and understanding multiple perspectives of how things happen and why things happen, means that teachers are looking for spaces to have people help resource them about different narratives and different stories. And so we're trying to help in that space as best we can, so we don't get resistance where people are us, when they can see that we want to help them. In terms of measuring the value and outcomes in any way, we do a post-visit survey after every visit, and that's online and on site. We do surveys after our seminars. So we take action to make sure that as soon as possible, we ask people for feedback on how we did. So we do have, I guess, those kinds of performance measures. The survey is a mix of a ranking out of 5, and then 3 or 4. Troy, is it 3 or 4? 4, I think, very open questions. Did we meet your learning needs? Is there anything about the way we delivered the visit that you have feedback on? Is there anything more that you would like us to cover in our visits? And so we quarterly go through those results, and we look at them, and we ask ourselves the questions about what's working well, what are we getting your feedback on, what do we need to have a look at. And yeah, end of last year, we came up with a list of things which teachers told us, and we went, yeah, they sound good. We should try as many of them as possible, within the capacity of the team. Yeah.
Thank you, Caroline. Another kind of grouping of questions maybe is, there's some interest in how you work out who are the disengaged groups. And I think Maya did discuss this a little bit already in terms of the tools for advertising certain opportunities. But how do you work that out? And Claire had an example of how they might do that in the UK. And separate to that, perhaps related, is this interest in bilingualism. So how do you approach resources to ensure that they're fully bilingual? I don't know if you want to handle those two questions together or throw to someone else in your team. Caroline, thank you.
I might, the disengaged groups, you might be able to do that one. I'll give you a chance to have a think about it, just in terms of Kantar, if you can think of something there. But I can, the bilingualism, like I said at the very beginning, we acknowledged that Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi, is a founding document of New Zealand, and that laid out the partnership. And so what that means is that we're committed to making sure that we make our resources accessible to people that speak Te Reo Māori. It is an official language of New Zealand. How we make sure that that is done is that there is a unit, and it is in the Office of the Clerk, called Ngā Ratonga Reo Māori. They are the translation unit, and they are really busy during the house time, because people that either get a speech or ask a question or answer a question in Te Reo Māori, it will be instantly translated. But they are also wonderful people, because on a regular basis we send them something and go, can you please translate this for us? So those online learning modules that I mentioned that go out, they're all translated into Te Reo Māori as well. It's just a commitment that we have to making sure not all the resources are, but we make sure as much as possible as our education resources are translated. May, did you want to say something about how we identify groups which are disengaged? Hopefully I haven't put you on the spot there.
Claire, I really liked your message about the research that you do and the 5 target groups that you have. So we, like I mentioned, work with Kantar, a data and analytics company, and they run research for us around engagement with Parliament. And I think they put the questionnaire out to 1,200 people, and 200 of those are 16 to 18-year-olds. So a range of people across New Zealand, and they ask questions like, does Parliament focus on issues that you care about, or do you think that you can influence Parliament and create a change? They also look at things around accessibility and submitting to a select committee, how people interact with Parliament. And then we get that data and can present it to different teams around Parliament who engage with the public, and how they can engage and connect better with groups that are disengaged. I feel like we could do a whole presentation around Kantar and the research that we get. So yeah, if you do want more information, please let us know, because we've got a wealth of it that we could talk about.
I think the other thing is that we've been using Kantar since 2019 as well. And because of that, we're comparing a lot of some really similar data about the public's perception of Parliament. It's probably only each year that we're allowed to change maybe 20% of the questions, just to try and refine it a bit more for things that have been happening, but we get pretty consistent data from that research.
Thank you so much for those answers, and we've got an excellent little suggestion for the IPEN and IPU group to consider for another presentation, so that's always great. I think there's a couple of questions now, and I think you touched on this a little bit around your structure, Troy, but could you unpack a little bit more whether you have a public outreach policy? And there was another great question about, do you have a teacher advisory committee as you develop the programs, or is that something you do in-house?
Cool. So I'll touch on the second one first. So we do have a teachers reference group that advises the Parliament education team on, anything to do with our work, whether that be resourcing, whether that be identifying a gap in the market around programming. They're just really knowledgeable teachers. A lot of them have over a decade experience in the classroom. Coupled with the youth reference group, so we've got the teachers reference group, we've also got an accessibility reference group as well, which I help with the logistics of. So I've just actually chucked a link to the website in the chat of the reference groups. Education, we've got quite a strong hand in all of those groups there. They're listed on those pages. When it comes to the outreach, so I was just looking at some of the questions in the chat. So there was one around whether or not we do any outreach when there's no MPs or a speaker present. So when it comes to like the speaker outreach program, obviously not, because speakers outreach, the speaker part's a pretty big element of it. But that's not to say that we don't do initiatives to engage. So for instance, we had a school, St. Mary's School, where members of the education team actually went in and did some workshopping around different social actions that the students could take, whether that be petitioning Parliament for a change, tips on lobbying their local electorate MP, and submitting to a select committee, which is a big part of how you can bring about legislative change. We've had instances where there's been, engagement sort of activities at other tertiary education providers that has been organised by the Electoral Commission. So again, completely apolitical, no MPs around, and a member of the education team has been there to field any questions people might have about the legislative process or how they can have their say on things. Hopefully that answers those questions, those queries.
Great. So I think we're probably coming to the end of our session today. There's a great kind of reach out from Kelsey there in the chat about other jurisdictions that might have official language, multiple official languages. And that's an example of the type of fantastic information sharing you can get through your membership of IPEN on our Teams channel, or also through IPU opportunities. But I'll just double check if there's any last questions before I do the final thank yous. Okay, well, I will move to Christina. Yes, please, Christina.
Sorry. You mentioned at the beginning that those amazing resources, bespoke resources you did on crisis management. Do you have any sense of how teachers have used them or how valuable they found them? Thank you.
So that democracy's response in a crisis one, we I guess we did a webinar on it, and we got we got some good responses from that, but I feel like actually when I went and spoke to teachers at a conference, I got a bit more of a feel for the fact that they found that really positive. We actually sat on it for about a year. It sounds a bit weird, is that, you know, those first initial lockdowns, depending on where you were living in the world, it just felt a bit too soon to put out something about them. So they went out 2021, and there was we did get good response from teachers, but we also got a good response from a person that was a professor down in one of the Christchurch universities, who said that their teacher trainees were using it, and that was really positive as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. There's some wonderful examples of other parliaments that are offering bilingual sessions, which looks fascinating. I might, just before I move on to the thank yous, just check in with Tamara and Christina about opportunities to promote upcoming seminars for all of the fantastically engaged people that were on the line today.
So the next seminar, the next IPEN IPU seminar, so for this public engagement hub, so which takes place on Zoom and for which you need to register, is going to be on the 28th of March, if I remember the date correctly. Fiona will correct me if I'm saying it wrong, but I think it's 28th of March. And I think it's going to be in the afternoon, so it's more towards the Americas times. But anyone from Australia and New Zealand is very welcome. Obviously, we've got Kelsey there, who's based in Canada, 1 o'clock in the morning. So it shows that it's doable, whatever the time. And it'll be on the fascinating topic of engaging future generations. So how do you engage future generations? So part of it are the generations already born, young people, but part, and the most interesting from my perspective, is the ones that are not even born yet. How do you engage and think about those who haven't been born in terms of how you plan policy? So that's on the 28th of March, and you'll be led by Didier Kalouvets from a university in Belgium, who's an expert on the topic. And I'll put the link on in the chat now for you to register if you're interested.
Thank you so much. I think Fiona's got the link in the chat. That's wonderful. Okay, so I then have the wonderful duty of thanking everybody for participating today. The questions were fantastic, and in particular to thank the speakers, Caroline, Troy and Maya. So can we show our appreciation with a virtual clap, please? That would be lovely, either with your reactions or a little wave or something. I know it's important to have a closing opportunity from our New Zealand colleagues. Just before we do that, I wanted to thank the interpreters for their services this evening or this morning, and to Christina and the IPU and IPEN executive for for assisting in the organising of this event. So Caroline or Troy, I'll now throw to you for your closing of our meeting.
Ngā mihi, Sarah, thank you very much. I'm just gonna preempt myself, so I'm gonna move the closing karakia now, but I'm just gonna put the English translation in the chat just so people understand what I'm saying. Yeah, so whakaime mai nā pūtoi kōrero, haupa mai nā whakaaro, tuia te kawereo ke runga e nā tūra, whakaputa e te whare kōrero o tātou, ki te aomarama nei, e rongo whakaerehia ke runga. Hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thanks, everyone.